Leaving your home behind will throw open the doors to a world teeming with unique individuals you'd be unlikely to meet otherwise. Each one has a perspective waiting to broaden your own. Unexpected connections with people from vastly different backgrounds are the lifeblood of travel. I spent 14 months traveling through Latin America. The first 6 months were spent in Mexico, followed by Colombia. I was alone in my shared apartment in Medellin for a few days before a new flatmate arrived. Sabrina was a young Somali-Norwegian woman taking a gap year. Her parents immigrated from Somalia as young adults and settled down to start their family in a small town in Norway. After graduating from university, she moved to Oslo, where she worked as a middle school social studies teacher. Sabrina was born Muslim, but to her family's dismay, she no longer practiced Islam once she became financially independent and moved away to live on her own. She didn't eat pork and didn't like dogs, but she also never wore a headscarf and never prayed. Even though she was born and raised in Norway, she preferred to have a Muslim boyfriend because they understood her better. There were still major cultural differences when she dated native Norwegian men. I know how she felt. Most of my romantic history involved intercultural or interracial relationships, but unlike Sabrina, I don't know what criteria I need in order to be better understood. I'm not Chinese enough, not American enough, and I'm not religious. Maybe what I need is someone who is understanding. Sabrina was staying in Medellin for a couple of months and built a productive daily routine right away. She got a gym membership and hired a personal trainer, which was much cheaper than in Norway. I used to go to the gym 5 days a week back when I lived in New York and Vietnam, but nowadays I rely on my fitness apps. Sabrina also enrolled in a local Spanish school and was taking an online course in sociology. I was currently taking private salsa and bachata lessons at a dance school in the neighborhood and invited her to join me. The wonderful thing about Latin dance is, unlike regular club dancing, salsa and bachata involve both exercise and practicing a skill. Sabrina was a beginner, and I'd say I'm intermediate since I took group lessons in Mexico City. We started going out to dance socials once she felt ready. It was a relief to have someone to walk home with after dark. I woke up one morning and checked my phone to find several frantic messages from Sabrina about hearing gunshots out in the street last night. I had already fallen asleep, but apparently she heard one shot, then 3 in a row, then silence, after which she couldn't sleep for the next few hours. I doubt I would have cared even if I were awake since I grew up in the United States, but I can imagine how terrified she felt growing up in Norway. Language exchanges are an excellent way to meet people, whether you're a foreigner or a local. There are many large ones with 50 to 100 people in the popular neighborhood of El Poblado. I didn't go to any because I knew the sheer amount of people would be too overwhelming for me. Luckily, there was a smaller language exchange in my neighborhood of Laureles, hosted at a casual restaurant owned by a Venezuelan family. Here I met Flash, and no, that isn't his real name. I never asked for his real name, and still don't know what it is. Flash was a Canadian traveler who decided to live in Medellin in the months before starting a new job in Peru. He was a carpenter back in Vancouver, and in his words, said his job was killing him hour by hour. Ironically, I've always romanticized the life of a carpenter, working with my hands and building custom furniture to the fragrance of wood shavings. This was the opposite of Flash's career in industrial construction. He built what he described as large wooden boxes to pour concrete into. Over and over, day after day, week after week. The same box. After a while, he felt like he was building his own coffin. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a few years ago and found his turning point in ayahuasca. After extensive experiments with his diet, he found stability in consuming only milk and orange juice. Not at the same time, he added jokingly. Milk was for protein and fat. Orange juice was for sugar, vitamins, and minerals. Nothing solid, he said. I once offered him a sip of passion fruit juice. He accepted, but then told me a week later that consuming that little bit of pulp took him days to recover. We often went out to eat, where I'd order my food and he'd order a glass of orange juice, with extra emphasis on zero pulp. I joked that together we had one complete meal, where I had the food and he had the drink. I bring my water bottle with me everywhere and rarely order drinks when I go out. Flash would laugh knowingly when I'd complain about stomach pains from indigestion. The days of eating for pleasure or simply chewing were now memories for him, and he was content with it. He said it was either find a way for his body to obtain nutrients or lose his ability to walk. With stakes that high, it was easy to make drastic changes. He was accustomed to the incredulity with hints of pity in people's reactions once he told them about his strange liquid diet. I told this to a friend back in New York who had multiple sclerosis for years now, and he was also in disbelief. We went to Comuna 13 on a Monday morning. It was, until rather recently, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods on the planet. Now it was a trendy place you could go for lunch and coffee. The outdoor escalators made me feel like I was in a shopping mall. They were built to save residents from having to climb the steep steps, reducing their daily commute and allowing elderly residents to come and go safely. I thought there were bullet holes in the concrete walls, but Flash corrected me, saying holes of that shape were intentionally made for construction purposes. The layers of houses and endless maze of stairs and alleyways were overwhelming. Reggaeton music blared from every direction. I asked how many songs he could hear at that moment. He counted 4. I counted 5. We agreed to disagree. Looking at the map on my phone made me laugh. A coffee shop 200 feet away was actually 200 feet up a steep flight of stairs. It was difficult to stop myself from peeking inside people's homes. They looked comfortable, with real beds and glass over the windows. Colorful flowers overflowed from beautiful window gardens. One living room even had an enormous flat-screen TV. But, of course, this was a popular tourist attraction that was generating money. I don't expect all the neighborhoods in the hills of Medellin to be like this. After a long walk around the area, we sat down to lunch. He had an orange juice with no pulp and extra sugar. I had the bandeja paisa, which is a 2,000-calorie tray of rice, beans, fried plantain, avocado slices, a fried egg, chorizo, ground pork, and chicharrón, which is deep-fried pork skin. I worked up an appetite from the uphill climb, so I devoured every last bite, much to his amusement. I washed it all down with a tall glass of lulo juice, which tasted like a combination of kiwi, orange, and pineapple. I'm grateful for many things. One of them is my high metabolism. Flash devoted most of his free time to learning Spanish. He confessed there wasn't much progress, but he accepted his slow pace of learning after seeing the lesions in his brain from an MRI scan. He'd exercise on his terrace in the afternoon and go to language exchanges in the evening to practice Spanish. To help relieve sleep troubles, he rubbed magnesium oil on his feet before bed. The skin on the top of the feet is the thinnest surface on the body. Absorbing magnesium oil is much faster than taking tablets. If anyone listening is struggling to fall asleep, try this clever hack. No longer a carpenter, he found a new vocation assisting in ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru and Bolivia. I asked him why ayahuasca became so popular in recent years, since I heard it mentioned as frequently as yoga or meditation retreats now. He simply responded, "Because people are suffering." I had no argument against this, but I did wonder if people suffered any more than they've always suffered. Life, on average, is objectively easier than it was for previous generations. We were living in Medellin and spending a fun day in Comuna 13 after all. The paradox is that while objective hardship might be less, there's a newfound willingness to be vulnerable about the smaller struggles that remain. At the same language exchange where I met Flash, I also met Duke. And yes, that is his real name. Duke was an American from Brooklyn, New York. He had been living in Medellin on and off for 2 years. Cost of living was affordable, and he was deep in debt from student loans and medical bills. He was looking for a job and had high hopes for a freelance digital marketing position he interviewed for a few days ago. Unfortunately, after presenting his 35-page deck, the prospective employer simply took his hard work for free and didn't hire him. He invited me to a small party in the neighborhood of Itagüí. It was the first time I saw high-rise apartments, little cottages with chickens and cows, and industrial warehouses all in the same neighborhood. The Venezuelan hostess made lasagna with slices of plantain instead of pasta sheets. She just started a new job as a debt collector and worked long hours. I think I spoke to more Venezuelans than Colombians during my time in Medellin. One of the guests was Rafael, a Venezuelan man who spoke fluent Mandarin and was overjoyed to practice with me. I did not expect to speak so much Mandarin in Colombia. Rafael had his own online language teaching business, specializing in English and Mandarin to Latin Americans, a niche combination. He told me in Venezuela, an English teacher gets paid more than an engineer. He offered me a job, but I politely declined since I was busy with my freelance work these days. He said there was a large Chinese population in Venezuela, mostly business owners, and that Asians had a higher chance of getting kidnapped than Caucasians. He was once kidnapped, and by the police, ironically, who wanted $5,000. He gave them the money, since he had it, and knew he could always make more. Rafa lamented the downfall of his country, but knew there was nothing he could do about it, and carried on with life. When I got home, Sabrina had just gotten back from an evening at Comuna 13 with her Spanish teacher and some of his friends. I didn't know it was safe to go there at night, but as always, the experience is different and usually better when you're with locals. She said the view from Comuna 13 was as beautiful at night as it was during the day, but the car ride down the hills was terrifying. Her driver was examining naked photos on his phone and texting enthusiastic responses with one hand, while navigating the steep, winding road with the other. She was relieved to make it back home in one piece. Rafael invited me to join him at a coffee language exchange on a Sunday afternoon. Since arriving in Colombia, my coffee intake has increased significantly. The coffee was delicious, affordable, and served in generous portions. I met Seamus, an Irishman on vacation in Medellin who lived and worked in Brazil. He spoke Spanish with a Portuguese accent, which I found charming. The subject of dating came up, and the table erupted into a heated discussion where I mostly stayed silent and observed. Rafael was single and gave up trying to date Colombian women because, in his words, they treated him like an ATM. Earlier this week, Seamus had a date scheduled and was shocked when she expected him to pay for the car to take her from her home to the restaurant. A Colombian woman at the table said a man should pay for everything on a date, from the transportation to the meal and anything involved in the evening's entertainment. Otherwise, it means he doesn't like her. Seamus replied, "In Ireland, women are equal to men. They are treated with respect, paid equally for the same work, and therefore can afford to pay for themselves." "But we are not in Ireland," I said. as the Colombian woman nodded. Seamus was used to paying for everything back in Brazil, but apparently Brazilian women took care of their own transportation? I wouldn't know. A young American man at the table was moving back to Mexico City soon after 4 months in Medellin. Last week, a local girl tried to drug him on a date. She showed up to the restaurant, scantily dressed, telling him she wasn't hungry, and suggested they find a place to smoke weed. She seemed in a rush and began directing him towards a dark alley, which was no doubt where his fate was to take an unfortunate turn. Luckily, he suspected what she was up to and dodged a nasty situation. His friend was not so lucky and did get drugged and robbed on a date. He remembered being on a date with a girl, getting very sleepy, then sitting in the backseat of a car with her while a man climbed in to join them. He woke up in the park with his phone and wallet missing, surrounded by police officers asking why he was sleeping there. An American girl at the table shot back, "Well, now you know what it's like to be a woman, having to worry about your safety whenever you go out on a date." The group dynamic was getting too tense for me to chip in. I'm usually very quiet in large groups, finding it wiser to listen. I began a separate conversation with John, a Vietnamese-American man who's been living in Medellin for over a year and had a Venezuelan girlfriend. I rarely saw Asians in my neighborhood, perhaps because I lived in the residential area of Laureles instead of the more touristic neighborhood of El Poblado. John set me straight. It was hard to be a regular guy in the United States or in any Western first world country. The cost of living was too expensive and women wanted too much. In Colombia, a man only needed to make $50,000 a year to be in the top 1%. This was enough to afford a decent apartment without needing roommates to split the rent. Here, he could afford cleaning services, organic produce, and take his girlfriend out on dates where they could get whatever they wanted and he could easily foot the bill like a gentleman. He knew most guys came to Colombia for the girls, and who could blame them? A Western man was perfectly satisfied with a beautiful, simple, sweet girl who worked at the supermarket. A Western woman, on the other hand, needed her man to have a 6-figure salary just to give him the time of day. John went on telling me about how Colombia has an 84% rate of single motherhood, how domestic violence and infidelity from men was through the roof. Of course, the Western man will do well with women here. He's less likely to beat you or cheat on you, and he'll give you and your future children a better life. There aren't many Western women coming to Colombia to give a local man a better life, he chuckled. However, he added, at least Western women come for more wholesome reasons and actually seem interested in the culture. Most of the guys are motivated by sex. Some want a real relationship, but most just want easy, casual sex with beautiful local women without having to spend too much money. Well, to each their own. I hope these men find some peace and keep their dignity in their pursuit of happiness. And after the evening's discussion, I hope they stay safe too. John walked me home, and even though it was only 9 p.m. and we were in a nice neighborhood, he preferred we walk on well-lit streets. We approached the main road, and to my surprise, several motorcyclists ran the red light right when we were about to cross. He said this was allowed for motorcyclists while driving at night, where stopping at red lights made them sitting targets for armed robbery. Oh my. I told Sabrina about my evening at the language exchange as well as John's monologue. She sniffed that these types of Western men have fragile egos and are too lazy and insecure to meet a woman halfway. She was going out almost every night of the week. There was no shortage of men who admired her beauty, personality, and exotic background. She didn't take any of them seriously. Local men were good-looking, charming, and eager to show her the hidden gems of Medellin, but she knew her life was in Norway. I just finished reading The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin, which tells the story of Joanna, who moves with her family to Stepford, a seemingly idyllic town. She soon notices the eerily submissive and domestically obsessed behavior of the women, and discovers the men of Stepford, all highly skilled engineers, are using technology to turn their wives into perfect, subservient robots. I laughed at the sheer comedy of their motives. These brilliant men weren't interested in building rockets to outer space. They used their talents to improve their domestic lives here on planet Earth, albeit through dark, unethical methods. I prefer Levin's other famous novel, Rosemary's Baby, where a young woman eager for a child moves into a strange apartment building with her ambitious husband. Unexplained events and unsettling behavior from their neighbors lead her to suspect a dark conspiracy. Her fears intensify when she becomes pregnant and realizes the horrifying truth. The coven wants her baby for a satanic ritual. The story preys on anxieties women face about their bodies, particularly when alone. As a solo female traveler, I often find myself wrestling with a mix of excitement and apprehension. While I've mostly encountered kind and welcoming people, the inherent vulnerability of a woman traveling alone can sometimes stir up deep-seated fears. It's a strange paradox. The desire for independence and adventure clashes with the primal instinct to seek safety and connection. Mark moved into our shared apartment a week later and began talking about Colombian women within 5 minutes of introducing himself. He was from Australia and came to Medellin in efforts to make his money last longer as he tried getting his digital marketing business off the ground. He complained how whenever he thought a local woman was interested in him, it turned out she was a prostitute. He didn't mind paying for dinner, but he did mind paying for their intimate company afterwards. He had a date that same evening with a local woman he met online, and I was worried for his safety after all the stories I heard. Mark seemed confident he was safe because she spoke with an American accent, and they were meeting in a nice restaurant. How could she possibly drug him when they were in a public place, he asked. Famous last words. Well, the woman changed location at the last minute because of the Friday night traffic, and this was enough to spook him into canceling the date. Mark could have been my age, but his hair was mostly gray, and he had terrible posture. He said he suffered from sleep apnea and had between 5 to 6 hours of sleep every night, according to his sleep tracker. He's had this issue since he was a child, often dreaming he was breathing underwater. Maybe that was the reason for his irritability during the day. He always spoke at an unusually high volume, which was comical after I told him I was American, and he immediately complained how Americans were always so loud. I overheard a phone conversation where he told his friend about asking out a Colombian girl he saw on the street and being rejected hard. I wasn't eavesdropping. He was just really loud. I could hear him from the balcony. One morning, I opened the fridge to find Mark had put his food on my shelf. When I pointed out the labeled spaces according to room number, he removed his food from my shelf, but put it on everyone else's shelves except his own, saying he'd deal with it later. Sabrina agreed. He was strange. Once, without asking, he reached over and touched her hair, which she wore in long braids cascading down her back. She said he probably had autism, which was generous of her. I just thought he was a prick. Mark was pickpocketed a few weeks later. He got into a crowded train during rush hour and had nowhere to hold on to, so he put both hands on the ceiling. He realized his phone was missing after getting off at a stop. He heard about a place downtown that sold stolen phones and thought about going there, but a local friend warned him it was dangerous. Mark left for Bogota a week later, saying the cold weather would help him sleep better. I wished him luck and hoped our paths would not cross again. Travel throws you into a melting pot of humanity. You will bump elbows with fascinating souls from all corners of the globe. Unfortunately, not every encounter is a sparkling gem. Such is the unpredictable nature of human interaction. Whether you're traveling or not, it's important to remember every person is a potential window into a different world, each with a unique history and perspective. Some will resonate deeply, others will not. The key is to approach with curiosity. Making friends in a foreign country can be daunting. Find out how I did it during my first week in Mexico City in this video, where a chance encounter in the park blossoms into a lasting friendship.